Good evening. First, a budget public hearing, September 11, 2023, 5:03 p.m. Aaron Lee McGahey Building, first floor, call to order. Please turn your cell phone to vibrate, silence, or the off setting. Was there proof of publication?
Mr. Chairman, the 5:01 p.m. first public hearing for consideration of the tentative budget for fiscal year 2023-2024 was advertised in the board's weekly meeting schedule in the Escambia Sun Press on September 7th, 2023. As required by Florida Statute 197.363, the 5:02 p.m. public hearing for consideration of adopting the fiscal year 2023-2024 first year assessment rolls for street lighting, pond maintenance, Perdido Key Beach Mouse, and nuisance abatement MSBU's was advertised in the Escambia Sun Press on August 10th, 2023. First-class notices were mailed to all property owners in the affected MSBU districts, and a notice of street lighting MSBU adjustment was also published in the Escambia Sun Press on August 10th, 2023.
Thank you so much. That was a long public announcement, but needed. Yeah, absolutely. Before we move to accept the adoption of the agenda, we'll move to a commissioner's forum. Commissioner McGosh, do you have anything?
Nothing, Mr. Chairman. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Kohler.
Nothing more than we should remember September 11th today. In honor of those people that passed. I have nothing else.
Well, thank you for your service to our country. Commissioner Bender.
Yes, maybe we can do the pledge after this, but I would again say remember those that sacrificed their lives on 9/11, the first responders, those that were forever impacted, those that lost their lives, and then also those that went and defended our country overseas. So thank you, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner Bender. Commissioner Berry.
No, sir, I just concur with our colleagues.
That's odd, but I'm probably won't be that way for the rest of the night, but I'm glad that you did. Certainly, thank each person for being here. It's the first of two public budget hearings. Nothing done here tonight will be set in stone. This is the first hearing to hear from our outside agencies, to hear from our staff, and hear from our public. At the final budget hearing will be the final determination. So nothing that will be set here tonight will be set in stone. It gives us an opportunity to set a tentative budget to come back and do a final budget at our second budget hearing. Commissioner Bender, thank you for obviously acknowledging that we should salute our country, but in proper protocol, what we've done on this board is to have an invocation. And Horace Jones, would you please come and give an invocation? After that, Commissioner Bender, would you please lead us in the pledge? Horace.
Yes, Val. Father God, we thank you, Lord, for tonight. God, we thank you, Lord, for everyone that's present. We ask that you give our commissioners and our leaders of this great community, Father, God, give them the courage and the wisdom to provide and use their wisdom to make this Escambia County better. Look on those, oh God, for 9/11, God. Look on their families and their loved ones. Give them comfort. In Jesus' great name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Commissioner Bender.
Thank you, Horace. Please join me in pledge to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Horace. Thank you, Commissioner Bender. Director Marino, is there anything for the good of the order in public forum that you'd like to state?
No, sir.
Thank you so much. The chair will entertain a motion for the adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. It seems we're having software issues. It was 5 yes votes.
Thank you so much, Madam Clerk. And maybe we ought to cut somebody and allocate some money for a voting system here because it failed us.
Well, we have already paid for voting systems.
Oh, we paid for 5 since I've been
we have paid
elected.
for the vote.
Yeah, well, it never works, and that's very unfortunate. So maybe we will. So we'll move to item 4, the 501 public hearing for consideration of the tentative budget for fiscal year 2023. and I guess Wes Marino will do a presentation. If my colleagues would endure, we certainly have speakers before Wes. Is that okay? Thank you so much. Our first speaker is Brian Wire. Well, Brian, that's a first. Thank you. Good start, though. I mean, you may get funded if you start with that.
We,
Excuse me?
nothing, just a reminder that we do have the script to follow, so just didn't want to get that forgotten in the midst of all that.
Yeah, well, and these are signed up for public forum, so I'm gonna let Chris Kerb, and then we'll do the script. All right, Chris Kerb.
Thank you, Commissioner. It's nice to be able to come up here and speak to our elected officials about how our money is getting spent. I was looking through your LOST4 budget, and you have $19 million in reserve, a little over $19 million. I was looking through your drainage engineering budget, and it's only $750,000 proposed. Few of these items, like your Scenic Hills Basin study, needs a little bit more than $200,000. It probably needs about another $300,000 for that one. You got Wood Run, Woodlands, Scenic Hills, Finley Drive, all that, and several developments that have been going up in that basin. Also, Bayou Marcus Basin B. There's been a lot of our flood defenders that have come up here asking for funding to be put toward that basin to do a basin study update and try to come up with some solutions for that area. And y'all do have some small Band-Aid projects going on for that. So respectfully request that y'all put a little bit more money into your drainage engineering and or your natural resources for maybe water quality and stream restoration. And the Beach Haven area would be another good project area to add some funding to. Since you do have $19 million in reserve, and I understand reserves are good to have, but when y'all are going after a lot of grant funding, and those grant funding agencies usually require match funding. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Madam Council, thank you for your advice. Director Marino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. This is the first of two required public hearings for the board to adopt the fiscal year 2023-2024 budget. The board later in the meeting will set the second public hearing. The Escambia County Board of County Commissioners approved the 2023-2024 tentative millage rates for trim notification purposes at the BCC meeting held on July the 18th, 2023. The law requires that prior to consideration of the tentative budget, an explanation of the rolled back rate be provided and entered into the records. The rolled back rate is a computed millage rate that would generate the same amount of ad valorem tax dollars as the prior fiscal year based on the proposed year's tax roll, excluding new construction. The millage rates tentatively approved by the board for trim notification are 6.6165 for the countywide millage rate, 0.359 for the library MSTU, 0.685 for the sheriff's law enforcement MSTU. The aggregate of these millage rates proposed for fiscal year 2023-2024 is 11.50%, above the rollback rate of 6.7023. Certified by the property appraiser. This represents the percentage increase in property taxes tentatively adopted by the board. For information and to avoid any misunderstanding concerning the process of this meeting, this public hearing is convened tonight to discuss the county's fiscal year 2023-2024 budget. Because of time constraints, we will need to confine our discussion to this subject. Increases in property assessments, remarks, or questions concerning individual property appraisals should be addressed to the county property appraiser at his office during normal business hours.
Thank you, Director Marino. At this time, the chair will entertain questions, discussion from the board. If you have any questions that you would like to talk about to staff or anything, are there any questions from my colleagues? Thank you. At this time, Director Marino, Community Partners discussion.
Commissioners, we are requesting that the board make a determination tonight regarding the funding amount to be allocated to each of our community partners. This funding determination is necessary in order to prepare the fiscal year 2023-2024 community partner funding agreements and to issue the associated purchase orders in a timely fashion. These purchase orders will come before the board for formal approval in October of 2023.
With that being said, we do have some speakers for this item for our community partners funding. First speaker will be Brian Henslin.
Good afternoon. I'm Brian Hilson with the Florida West Economic Development Alliance, and I'm new to the community, but I want to thank the commission for its previous support of economic development in the county. And I just want to call to your attention a few things that I see and that we're looking at in order to help sustain economic growth in the county. We're focused primarily on business recruitment, business retention, the types of targeted businesses that we think make the most sense for the county given the assets and the advantages that we have. We also are continuing our entrepreneurial development center, which you would know as CoLab. And I want to tell you a little bit about each of these. At any given time, we're working with companies, both existing, potential expanding companies and prospective new companies, both foreign and domestic companies. Currently, those combined companies represent the potential of over 1,200 jobs for the county and over $2 billion in capital investment. Those business types range from manufacturing to information technology, even one life sciences company, so it's an exciting time for us. The CoLab tenants, currently there are 18 of them. They represent 45 total employees. They are in IT, cyber, business services. And over the past 11 years, there have been 42 other companies that have graduated from CoLab, and they represent 181 total jobs that have been created and have moved on to their current locations. Our priorities going forward are a focus on not only marketing, but doing all that we can to make the community more marketable. Workforce, infrastructure, property development. We have to make sure that that our assets are aligned with what we're trying to do in marketing, and I'm not sure that that's always been the case. So we'll be focusing on that. Another issue that's part of marketing is image enhancement. We'll pay a lot of attention to that to tell the county's story. Along the way, we'll also use performance metrics to help us understand statistically how we're doing against our past and also against peer communities that we think we will compete with or just simply want to compare with. It's an exciting time. I am really, really glad to be in Pensacola and Escambia County and look forward to working with all of you. Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, should I entertain questions now or later?
Absolutely, and
glad
I'll start with the questions, and then I'll yield to my colleagues. And so one of the things, obviously, we fund at least $500,000 to $600,000 to Florida West, and we've done that since the inception. And one of the things that I've talked about is workforce development, particularly for those underserved neighborhoods. And I think Claire Long is here, or Wesley Hall, and today that I think they met with PSC and George Stone and Fortis, Pensacola State. And I know that we funded a position for workforce development. And so I guess in hopes that in our Block by Block program, we're not duplicating services, how are we working in workforce development with the county and Workforce Escarosa to do workforce development? And so I think you had a member at that meeting today. And so we want to fund it, but I don't want to fund duplication of services and what I guess Claire and her staff's doing versus what you do versus what Correa Escarosa does. And Commissioner Berry, thank you. You brought that point to a head for me at the last meeting. So I want to put my arms around that and say, we funded that at the tune of that staff for multiple years, and I've yet to see the metrics of the results of what that workforce position has done when we ask for additional funding. And so that would be my question to you. And you're new, so maybe you don't know, but that would be very important to me before the final budget of has it benefited us in terms of developing jobs, particularly in the construction industries and those underserved industries where people are looking for jobs. So I'll
Yeah.
give it to you, and then Commissioner Berry, you'll be next.
Well, you've touched on the issue that's most important to economic development in most communities, and I think in Escambia County. It's part of the alignment challenge, making sure that the workforce that we have is qualified to meet, to correspond with the companies that we're helping grow. With Marcus McBride's organization, I've met with them. I know a good bit about what they're doing. Florida West has had in the past a workforce position, but there's not a position currently dedicated to that. Commissioner, I've got to make sure that
There's not a position?
there's not a position that is solely dedicated to workforce.
And just put a pin and help me. I thought we funded a economic development position for Florida West. Is that not true?
I mean, there was a previous staff person who is not there anymore, I believe.
But we
I
funded
could be
that.
wrong.
Okay, all right, but I know we did fund it. I mean,
Yes.
I was very supportive of that. So, I mean, maybe you don't have it, but I know that it was funded because I voted for it. But go ahead, Brian.
Yeah,
Sorry.
but you know, I've got to make sure that.
And not saying you should be doing that. Maybe that's Marcus' job, but I know we did fund it.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, it's a balance, and if there are gaps that we need to address in workforce delivery between that organization, ours, and potentially any others, then I want to make sure we understand what the gaps are and that we fill them. For example, you know, a robust economic development program that has as its highest goal job creation, and that's part of the metrics that I mentioned a moment ago that we'll measure ourselves by, should not be only, and this is where some people get misled on this, should not be only the highest paying jobs, because not everyone in the community is qualified for the highest paying jobs. Right. You know, not everybody wants to be or is qualified to be an engineer or a scientist. So we have to have, you know, diversity comes in a lot of flavors, and one of them is occupations and career opportunities. We've got to have positions and people qualified for a wide range. I don't know that what Marcus's program is doing covers all of that. We probably need to be paying attention to skills alignment in some of the higher level occupations that require recruitment, not just of companies, but of people, of talent. So that's a typical gap that a lot of metropolitan areas have, and that's one I've got to figure out.
Brian,
Great question.
No, and Brian, I appreciate it. And we've tried for 3 years to get our workforce development in our block by block program off. And I'll tell you, if we don't get it off the block, I mean, we're going to cut funding, in my opinion, you know, next budget cycle. But if we don't align our workforce development and our economic development strategies with our educational and workforce training, we'll create jobs, and we will never, ever satisfy the need of those who live in the pockets of poverty. We will continue to have to import talent to fulfill the jobs that we create. And so if we're not creating them with training, then, you know, every year for 10 years, I funded to $500,000 to $600,000, and I've yet to get the results that I want in my district. And I'm only one of 5, but I can't continue in good faith to support the lack of creation of jobs within the area that I represent. So I know you're new. Just wanted to just put that, me and you met privately. So I hadn't told you anything publicly that I hadn't told you privately, but I'm not going to be able to support anything that doesn't create jobs within the pocket of poverty. I've had 18 shootings in my district of people that need jobs. And so I have to create jobs that are blue collar, light manufacturing jobs for the constituents that I represent.
Yeah, the triad between business and industry, educators, and the workforce, students, parents, all need to know what one another has to offer and needs. And that's the foundation of a robust economic development program that is workforce driven.
Thank you, Brian. Commissioner Barrett, sorry for taking so much time.
No, not at all.
I know you serve on the PEDC, and you probably have much more knowledge than I would have on economic development, so I yield it to you.
Well, yeah, I've served on there for a long time. nonetheless, so, you know, you mentioned if Mr. McBride's organization wasn't meeting one of the needs, or, you know, wasn't meeting some of the needs, you know, candidly, our board can't meet those needs if his organization is not. I mean, he's got an $8 million budget that's funded through the state of Florida and through the federal government to supply and develop the workforce in Escambia and Santa Rosa County. And that's where, in my opinion, workforce development needs to be housed. You know, if there's a gap there, I would ask that you or your organization work with Mr. McBride, who I have a lot of confidence in his ability to deploy programming if needed by your organization if there's a gap. I would look back on my phone, on my calendar for when a discussion was had. There was a 2-day strategic planning session in January of 2018, so over 5.5 years ago. I aired my opinion that I didn't think Florida West should be doing workforce development that we had at the time. It was called Workforce Escarosa, now it's Career Source Escarosa, nonetheless. And that wasn't a majority opinion, so that's not what happened. The programming, the program is still there. So, you know, my opinion and my conversation is not, it wasn't unique to our meeting a couple of weeks ago. From my point of view, the tangible results that our board can take back to taxpayers is going to be related to job growth and to capital investment into the community.
Absolutely.
Those are the two things that we can analyze, that we can say, look at these successes. That's going to be our report card. The success in workforce development, again, you know, and I don't know, and, you know, kind of need to know before we have another budget meeting, but, you know, I don't know exactly how much of the budget at Florida West is going towards that now or has been historically going there. After that position after someone resigned and the position was not filled, I don't know exactly what happened to those resources, but I presume they were reallocated to something else. But our board at the time was funding that. I do not think that that's what that entity should be focusing on. You know, when you have multiple focuses, you're often not particularly effective. And you know, there have been challenges with our board and our economic development agency partner. I'm sure in some of your conversations when you came to our community, you were made aware of some of those challenges that we've had. So I and our board, I think, have been unconditionally supportive of every economic development idea that has come to the board. Every ordinance that's been asked for, every e-date that's been asked for, every supportive letter towards this grant funding or this programming funding, whatever the case may be. Our board has been unconditionally supportive for the entire 11 years of mine and Commissioner May's service. So we are very supportive of economic development. We all understand the impact that it has on our community, which is a very good one. But the increase in funding towards the military effort, I think that's a great idea. I think that's important. I mean, clearly, I think our entire board and presume the fact it's included in the budget as a proposed line indicates some board support for the military effort, which I support as well. The 125,000, I don't know. I think that's a number that was just kind of arrived at as an increase. I don't know exactly where that tangible number came from. I'm very supportive of the idea, but I'm also supportive of winding the agency out of the workforce development portion. And there have been funds that have been going to that position. I don't know where those are budgeted to go now. I don't know if it's on track to try to fill that position. But over the next couple of weeks, perhaps we can spend a little bit of time together and talk about that. What your ideas are for that position, because there are some resources there, and supporting the military, the lobbying and the advocacy for our military bases and the impact that they have on our community. I think that all of us understand that's hugely important. So I'm supportive of that. I need to pin down some of exactly what the 125,000, how that was arrived at, and who is actually how that's going to be allocated, what we're actually doing there. I mean, it has seemed like kind of an arbitrary number. So just to my colleagues, like I said, I'm supportive of the military effort, but I do have some concerns about, the operations of the agency itself and the focus. I want the focus to be on jobs and capital investment in our community. Those are the two things that I think that, that the agency should be laser focused on, not
Yeah.
other things. It's very difficult when you have multiple focuses because you can say, well, I haven't been real successful in this, but I have been really successful in this other endeavor. Well, I mean, there's one endeavor that pays the bills and there's one endeavor that's kind of ambiguous. And the bringing jobs and capital investment is what pays the bills, you know, from my point of view, for my vote on the board.
Well, we're absolutely on the same page with jobs and investment as the highest priority, and to me, there's really nothing else. And, you know, there are a lot of economic development organizations that kind of piddle around with other things. Mr. Chairman, on the workforce position question, I can tell you that our staff spends a lot of time addressing, reacting to companies' workforce issues, and we do that through our business retention and expansion program. We just don't have someone who is 100% dedicated to workforce. Secondly,
Brian, I will, maybe you don't at this point, but at some point you did.
oh yes, yes.
Which is not under your tenure.
I've been
But at
made
some
aware of
point,
that.
You
Right.
did have a person.
Right.
And maybe well-intended, few results.
Yeah, I've heard the same.
Yeah, few results.
But let me be really clear about this. Our focus is on jobs and capital investment, and other programs that need to exist or improvements that need to be made, just so they get done, whether it's workforce or infrastructure or property development or incentives or anything else. I'm not about the process of growing our organization so that we've got responsibilities that someone else can do or hopefully can do better than we can. And workforce is probably a very good example of that. So just know that as long as we can identify gaps and someone can properly fill them so that we are as prepared as we should be as a county, as a community, then we're good.
Brian, I appreciate that. And Commissioner Berry, maybe just to respond to you, obviously we can't talk unless we're in these settings when we come to a budget. I don't think that anyone's been more supportive than you and I, and you know, unfortunately, you're a young guy, but I'm old, but we've been on this board longer than anybody. And we've always supported military affairs. There's probably not one E-date that was brought forth that we probably didn't support, and I've held my nose because at one time when I got on this board, there was over $500 million worth of E-dates that was on the board that could have gone to social programs, sidewalks, flooding, drainage, because that's real money. So when we give an E-date, I mean, you know, it's real. I mean, it's money that would come into this county.
And let me say also, I don't have the answer to the 125. I don't know exactly where that number came from and how it balances, but okay.
Brian, with all due respect, it was not even directed to you. It was directed to my colleague.
No,
to
I
my
understand.
right.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
It was directed to my colleague. And so, you know, I'm as patriotic as anyone, Steve. But when we talk about people coming tonight in these outside agencies looking for money for homelessness, looking for poverty, looking for affordable housing, how do you eliminate that? You don't eliminate it by creating more shelters. You don't create it by creating more social service programs. You create it by giving people jobs. And so if we're not creating jobs for the least of them who are residents of this community without importing people who are driving to Santa Rosa, Okaloosa, and Walton County, I mean, I'm not interested, you know, and people say there's a multiplier effect because they have sales tax. I'm not interested in supporting initiatives that create jobs that doesn't help the core of poverty and the pockets of poverty that we've talked about for the last 10 years that I've been elected. So I can be supportive of military affairs, but I mean, it has to be a deeper conversation of the strategies, and obviously Brian's new, of how are we going to go get those people who are re-entering society, those people who are looking for blue-collar jobs and construction jobs. To me, that's important. And so I support the military, will always support the military, but unfortunately, the military has a funding source called the federal government that local government will never match. And, you know, that's the reality
Absolutely.
of it. I mean, and that's the reality of where that is for me. And so, I mean, I look forward to, you know, further discussion of where we go, but my commitment to moving in that direction comes with a lot of reservation, and it will have to be further discussion for me. Commissioner Bender? I'm sorry, Steve, I said that and didn't give you a time to rebuttal me.
Yeah, I'm good, bud.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Bender.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate both of y'all's support for the ask of the 125 and whatever amount that ends up being. And I'll have those that are involved in it reach out to your offices to try to set up a time to go through that. It is not just us that they're asking for funding from. And I saw Alex Smith walk in. I've had discussions with him about the city also contributing to some amount towards this. And hopefully they can find it in their budget to also support this. So I appreciate your support for this, and we'll work to set up some meetings so they can come talk to you about
Yeah,
it.
we'll see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
And Robert,
I understand it's not the 125 right now, but I'm just saying that
Yeah.
I appreciate the support, and we can discuss it further. Thank you.
And Robert, you know, I always move for a consensus, and certainly, I don't know who brought this, because sitting on this dais is the first time I've heard that. And, you know, could I be supportive? I absolutely can. I mean, Alex probably is the next mayor. I don't know. I really don't care. But the reality for me is no way that I'm going to support that initiative without funding for what we're fighting: poverty, homelessness, and those people who are not graduating, who are displaced, and a strategy on how we're going to create those jobs. I mean, and that's the multiplier effect of how do we create those jobs for people who are in the judiciary, who are in the judicial system, who are no longer being incarcerated, that we're housing at $80 to $90 a day. There has to be a long-term strategy for that. And I'm not saying we're going to cure it all, Robert, and I'm not saying it's not a bad idea for this military, whoever brought that. I'm saying, for me, for the vote that Lumen May is going to make, it has to be all-inclusive. For me, at the next budget hearing, how those strategies come forth with workforce development. Commissioner McGosh?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Of course, I'm in full support of Brian. Congratulations on being selected. It was great to be a part of the committee that brought you aboard.
Thank you, sir.
And I appreciate your time in our one-on-one meeting in my office. And I know you got your work cut out for you, and there's a lot to do. And I would simply say, Mr. Chairman, I support everything that Brian and his team and Danita are doing. They're going to bring. There's just a lot of opportunity out there. There's a lot going on at the Bluffs. Obviously, there's OLF 8. Once we figure out, what we're going to do with that, that will help a lot. And I agree with you 100%. We've got to have a spectrum of jobs created. And I think there has to be some linkage. And I hope one of the things that I'm hoping for, Brian, is that you can work with our school district. Of all the Panhandle counties and the school districts, they've all gone in and got the Triumph Gulf Coast grants for workforce training. And I know, Commissioner May, that's important to you. For whatever reason, Escambia County hasn't. And I've spoken with my counterpart on the school board. There's been hesitation, so hopefully that's something you can work with them on, because like Commissioner May said, it's very true. We have to link our efforts at elementary, middle, high school, and then into the workforce. And this area has suffered many, many years with pockets of poverty, the same areas, and it would be great to have something that gives those folks a hand up out of the poverty and into the middle class. So I'm going to support that. But at the same time, I think we can do both, because I do understand the value of the military missions, particularly at Corey and NAS. If there's a lot of competition, there's a lot of jockeying for position at the federal level, and congressional seats and Senate seats, and a lot of these states, would like nothing more than to pull some of our missions. So those are very, very good paying jobs. They really contribute. If you look at the defense sector in Escambia County, it's more than 50%. So it's very important. So I think we can do both. We can agree to disagree on the amount, but I'm going to be supportive of our efforts there, as well as the efforts that the chairman talks about, because I think we can do both. And I think this money coming out of our local option sales tax is a perfect place for it to come from. Because when we got the referendum, thank you to the people who voted for it, up to 15% was set aside specifically in the referendum for economic development, which is what we're talking about. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Commissioner McGosh, thank you, for your position, and certainly there's in no way that I don't recognize how important our military is. Diversity means that there are a lot of different flavors. Inclusion means I have the opportunity to choose what flavor I want. And so we can talk a lot about diversity, but until we include all of them, our efforts are in vain. And that means all the people in this economy. And so certainly our military is very important, and people are transit. They come here, they make a difference, and some stay, most don't. But those that are born here, raised here, and live in these neighborhoods, a pocket of poverty, they have no choice but to work here. and they need to be included in the opportunity to get a job. And so I'm not anti with this at all, Robert or Jeff. What I'm saying, it has to be an all-inclusive plan. And, you know, I have one stroke at the opportunity of funding, and that's at budget time. And so if we don't voice our opinion or our positions, then that's unfair. It's unfair to our economic development partners to give them unrealistic expectations and to have someone come in and not understand. I'm only 1/5, you know what I mean? So if there's not jobs created in District 3, you know what? If we're gonna fund to the tune of whatever we tune, just give me 1/5 of that, and I'll just go out and do a direct service and just give them money. I mean, they'll be happier if I'm not creating jobs for them. You know, and so those metrics have to be important. Commissioner Kohler, then Commissioner Bender.
Hey, Brian, thank you for being here tonight and presenting that. And
Yes, sir.
I appreciate you sitting down and with me on what you did in Huntsville, and I think you're right on defense contracting, some of the things. We're using the word military a lot, and honestly, it's the people that support the military which help all our districts. The GS, the NAF employees, the non-appropriate funds, and the contractors. They're such a huge impact. Those are recession-proof jobs. It's not the military. They're going to come and go to another duty station. And I think I want to just highlight, those are the jobs that are the people that live in all of our districts, that some of them serve 30, 40 years supporting the military mission. I don't know I know where the 125,000 came from. I don't know how it's going to be allocated. You probably know better than me, Ron.
Excuse me, what'd you say?
I know where the 125,000 came from. Dave Hoaxing asked, but I think Robert may know how they want to spend it. I don't. So, I'm not putting you, I just don't know if you do or not.
I mean, you have to derive from whether it's salaries, expenses, I mean,
Right.
yeah, I mean.
So I don't know that
right.
either, so, but I think that the focus of what we're talking about should be highlighted on what I just stated, on who's actually in those jobs, because those are the people supporting the military mission that help everyone, all of us. And that's all I want to say. I appreciate what you're doing, Brian.
I appreciate it, Commissioner Cole, and it'd be great to have those metrics with zip codes, addresses, and demographics. That'd be helpful. Yep, it'd be very helpful. Commissioner Bender?
Thank you.
Do mind?
I was going to say, I was probably echo a little bit what Mike was going to say. I was going to say, you know, as for how it ended up here, I asked for it to be on here. It's something that we've been, you know, I've been a part of this year, and going to DC and fighting for that federal money to come this way. But a little bit like what Mike said, it's not just the military that this is going after. So, I mean, I see Allison Hill here. I mean, they have GCE and the types of jobs and the number of jobs that are employed through that organization in this community. You know, again, we're looking at Corey and what we can do with cyber, and it's not just the military mission that would come. It would be those ancillary, you know, outside the fence jobs and companies that come and open up the door for again, all opportunities, whether it be the core mission of the company that it's supporting, or the janitorial and construction services of building buildings and renovating buildings and things like that. So, you know, of course, it does play an important role, and I'd hate to say it, but I mean, of course, if you know, if they were to leave, I'd say the issues that we're facing now would pale in comparison to what we would be facing at that time. So, again, I'll.
And Robert,
yeah.
I agree with you. I agree with what you're saying. However, we could funnel our entire outside agency money towards that effort if we don't have, for whatever the reason, if we don't have more support out of Congress on that level, we don't have the political capital to move the needle. We could funnel all of this money. I mean, these are rounding errors within, you know, defense budgets. Sure. I mean, these are rounding errors. I mean, and I don't mean the 125. I mean the entire outside agency budget. And if we don't, you know, in my opinion, we nor whoever Florida West can, you know, whoever they would contract with, don't have the political capital to move the needle if the needle is not movable in DC, and that is apparently an issue, and we are not going to overcome that issue by ourselves. So again, hypothetically, I do agree about everything, that y'all are saying, but there are other underlying issues that are hampering our success.
Yeah, yes, sir, and I think we've had two very good trips to DC this year already. The one that we were going to do later this month, we're going to delay due to the potential shutdown. And, and we're not going up there and just talking with our delegation. It's other legislators across the aisle throughout the state of Florida. And, we had the pleasure of having Senator Broxton join us on the last trip. And even talking about how, how we might be able to benefit from state of Florida opportunities as well. So, like I said, I'll make sure that the information gets shared to you. It's definitely a multi-county effort, and I appreciate just the general support. Thank you.
Brian, I don't want you to have to stand there. You want to just sit down? I don't want you to have to keep standing.
I'm good.
Robert, and Commissioner Berry is absolutely right. I mean, and so when you talk about realignment, base closures, and those type of things, there's nothing we can do. We don't even have the lobbyists or the political influence to make a difference when the message comes out of Tallahassee. I mean, literally, when you talk about, it's not Pensacola or Escambia County, it's the state of Florida. So I agree with you, and I'm going. I mean, but that's a heavy lift when we're not in line with what comes out of the governor's mansion. And so I agree with you. And so you brought Allison and GCE. I like them. There's not a person there that has livable wage that can pay $2,000 a month for rent. I mean, the reality, it's not about the person that works at GCE. It's about their dad, their grandmama that's going to get a job that has a livable wage. And so, quite frankly, you live in the projects of Oakwood Terrace. Rent is $1,000. So when someone tells me janitorial jobs and somebody making $15 an hour that I should jump up and clap, I can't clap because you know what? That's the same person that I'm having to give out Christmas toys to. That's the same person that I'm having to pay their light bill and their water bill because they make $12 to $15 an hour. When we're talking about jobs, we're talking about creating livable wages with jobs that are important, not jobs who support military that are cleaning bathrooms and serving grits that make $12 an hour that can't take care of their family. Those are not real jobs. Those are jobs that could continue to put people in the pockets of poverty. And I said, if we're going to move as a progressive community, we have to create those high-paying jobs. Those are beginning jobs. Those are jobs that you get when you come through a program like GC. It's a job that you're doing when you're working in high school, a job that you have in college. But we can't expect for people to take care of 2 children, to go to work every day and make $12 to $15 an hour, and we say that we're doing job creation. That's not job creation. That's poverty creation. That's creating systemic poverty, and we are not doing our jobs when we're spending millions of dollars of E-dates in subsidizing things, and we're not creating jobs where people can take care of their families. That's all I'm saying. And I've said that at every budget hearing, and I'm never going to let anybody sit here and tell me, oh, we created some jobs at GCE for people. No, they still got to catch the bus. You know what? In the rain, they still got to walk. They still don't have an opportunity to buy a home, and they are still one paycheck away from being in poverty. And once they get in poverty, when they make $12, $15 an hour, they never get out. And so here's the multiplier effect. Even if I'm the most conservative person in the world, I recognize that once that person misses that boat, we have to take care of them in perpetuity. They never get out, Robert. So I agree with you, and Robert, I'm going to be supportive of that, but we have to create those people who want it. Not everybody wants it, but we have to create that job for those who want it. And so that's where I am, Brian. And Brian, I'm sorry that you had to get this soapbox, but it's where I am. It's where my vote's going to be, and I can be supportive. But we got to create real jobs. And when I hear people talking about creating janitorial jobs, let's create janitorial jobs for people in the inner city. No, unacceptable to me. Let's create them a skill set where they can go and be a masonry. They have a skill that allow for them to take care of their family. Any more questions for Brian? Brian, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Cheryl Howard.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Here on behalf of the African American Heritage Society, we're seeking the same amount of funds that we have sought in the past year. And we believe that we are continuing to promote tourism in the area by virtue of having the African American Heritage Society programs and events and participating with Visit Pensacola. Are there any questions regarding our application?
Anybody have any questions? No, there are no questions.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Cheryl, for being here. Colleagues, there are no more people signed up for community partners. Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. Carolyn Graw? Carolyn? Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you for being here. Director Marino? Unless there's any conversation from my colleagues. If none,
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Berry.
If you don't mind. So, Robert, what is the trolley thing on the Island Authority?
It's through TDT, and I believe it is to fund the operations of the trolley service that they went in front of the TDT board and asked for.
Jeff, was that something you?
Yes, sir.
okay.
My recollection of that is we did a swap of the funding, and they paid for the chassis for the trolley. Is this the one we're talking about, Robert, out there and
It's
the Island Authority?
$250,000.
250.
Yeah,
And Lisa,
So,
you're
yeah, what did they pay for?
I think they paid for the actual trolley, the buses that are used out there, and in exchange for us giving some operational money. And that was something that was brought separately to the board.
So in exchange for, explain it, Jeff. You just lost me.
Lee, why don't you come on up?
Lee Davis is from the Island Authority. She's, if I remember right, Lee, you sent emails to us, I believe, on that one? Yeah, you could probably explain it better than I can, but I know it was a swap. It was a funding swap.
Good evening, Commissioners. Yes, so typically the SRIA puts $250,000 in our operating budget to operate the trolley service between Memorial and Labor Day. We contract with ECAT to run that service for us. What we requested from the TDC is that they fund that next year, the operating piece. We then took that $250,000, put it into our capital improvement budget that was already at $300,000 for the replacement of all three of the trolleys that are at the end of their life cycle. So SRIA's budget has $550,000 for the replacement, and then we requested just for this one fiscal year the operating dollars to do the $250,000 for next year.
So who owns the trolleys?
You guys actually own the trolleys. Those first three that were purchased before were then transferred to the county, and so the county owns those three trolleys.
So you would buy the trolleys and transfer them to the county?
Presumably, I mean, that's how the arrangement was done before.
Have they been bought yet?
I'm sorry, Commissioner?
Have the new trolleys been bought yet?
No, sir. We're going to issue an invitation to bid for those, but we have been working closely with ECAT on the specs for those trolleys and what would go in that invitation to bid.
All right, so it's a one-time ask.
Yes, sir.
But see, Wes, why wouldn't we bid it out? I mean, obviously, we buy a lot of buses. Why wouldn't we do the procurement versus them if it's our money? I mean, why are we moving money to allow for Santa Rosa Island to procure it?
Commissioner, we could do it that way.
I mean, that makes more sense to me. I mean, we get a better price, I would assume.
We would probably look for a cooperative contract. I would imagine what we would do.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know why we would give them money to procure.
So the money that's in the budget is for the operating service of it, which actually does come back to the county because we contract with you guys to do the operating.
So you have a
of that.
separate source for the purchase? And
Yes, sir. The separate source is from SRIA leaseholder funds to do the purchase of those trolleys.
So you're purchasing them out of lease fees,
Yes, sir.
and then you're asking us to give you money to operate them?
Just for the operating dollars, yes, so that we could move our lease fee money into the capital investment.
Is Rod helping you with the procurement of the actual buses?
Yes, sir.
He is.
They're working with us on the specs and have been working with us on the agencies that might be able to, vendors that might be able to.
Okay.
do that.
So the money, Wes, would be just transferred to our account. We wouldn't give money to create another administrative fee on the money, get it Santa Rosa Island and stuff, and then give it back to us? How does that work? Help me clear that up.
So Commissioner, the Island Authority is actually, to her point, they're using lease fees to purchase the buses. We're just freeing up operational dollars. So if you only, again,
Operational dollars to pay who?
the operational activities.
Pay us to operate.
Right, that's what I'm
Correct.
saying. So why do I give them money
for-
to give me back to pay me?
for trolley services. So, the Island Authority does not provide us with the lease fee budgets to purchase this. So what the Tourist Development Council approved was well, not really the transfer, but to allocate funds to support operating purposes to free up their internal dollars to purchase the assets, which would be the trolleys. And the 250, I'm not sure how many, can you tell us how many that was going to pay for?
3.
And what is the total to be purchased?
I don't have the bid back yet, but in the neighborhood of, $510,000.
So we're taking TDC dollars to pay $250,000 for the operations of a trolley for the beach alone, for the island. So help me, how much are we paying out of TDC dollars to operate trolleys for downtown?
0, I believe.
And Robert, I'm supportive. I mean, our downtown, our Mardi Gras, I mean, there's a lot of things in Historic Belmont. There's a lot of other tourism attractions that just doesn't reside in the island. I mean, I'm not saying I'm not going to support this. I'm saying for me, it has to be a further conversation because I don't see Rodriguez here. But I've said consistently from this dais, you know what, people come and they stay downtown. They can't get from Belmont developers to the Blue Wahoos because we're not running a trolley and we're not putting any money, and there are tourists that come down there. I mean, and so, if I'm going to spend $250,000 just for the island to satisfy probably, I don't know how many residents you have, 2,000, 3,000. I mean, there are 10 or 20,000 residents with visitors that come, that live downtown, that would love to grab a trolley and come down on Palafox and get it. So that's, and Robert, that's just, and you represent a large portion of that district, but for me to just support $250,000 for a trolley on the beach, I mean,
Well, again,
without
this is
supporting
something we've
other
had the
people.
last couple of years. It's only operated Memorial Day to Labor Day, and I think that shows the nature of the tourism side of it and why they came and asked for it.
But that's a lot of money, Robert, to operate from, in that season, $250,000 just for operations.
Sure.
And have we never paid for that out of our ECAT budget, Stephen? Has it always been a TDC ask?
No, it's been paid for out of the Island Authority. The trolleys were, I think, originally purchased through the Portofino Island Fund, if I'm correct.
Yes, sir.
Those were then given to the ECAT, which I believe uses them every Monday for jury selection, running the loop
Right, yeah,
from the Bay Center. And so it's, it's, what time you guys start? 4 o'clock in the afternoon till
4 to midnight,
4 to midnight,
7
7 days a week, Memorial Day through Labor Day. And so it was.
And then we have the interlocal agreement with ECAT to run that, so we.
Listen, I'm not questioning you. I mean, and so we have these discussions. And,
Yes, sir.
And so at this point, as you realize that you're exiting out of this seat and you want to make a difference. So let me just tell you, when I'm at Brownsville Community Center and JC can't get on the bus because he doesn't have $1, but then I'm paying for somebody to ride down the beach, that's where I am. Or I'm paying for somebody, that is staying down here and these are tourism dollars. So I get it. So tourism dollars can't pay for JC, but it certainly can pay for somebody that wants to go to Historic Belmont Developers, which is the oldest African-American neighborhood probably in the country, that can't come down to O'Reilly's and get a trolley back. And so that's quite a bit of money to pay without being very inclusive. No offense. Robert, I agree. I mean, maybe it's worth it. I don't know. I mean, Robert, you may say it's worth $250,000. I don't know what the ROI is. For me, as we move forward to the second budget hearing, I got to understand what that ROI is. And to do an analysis of impact of what it could do for other neighborhoods. So I appreciate it. And while you're here, we had another question, and I'll get Robert. And so we did take over Public Works for the Santa Rosa Island Authority. I mean, I don't get, how many years ago?
Yes, sir, 2015.
2015. So in terms of, what did that do to your budget? What did that reduce your budget to, and how did that help you be more efficient?
Yes, so that significantly reduced our budget and also
Your revenue or your expenses?
our expenses, and then the revenue was reduced correspondingly. The lease fees were reduced by 50%. So when that action was taken by your board, our board reduced the lease fees by 50%.
So your revenue was reduced by 50%?
Yes,
And
sir.
then we probably took on the expenses for you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Commissioner Berry?
Yeah, so it was brought up, again, as my colleague said, since you're at the podium, it was brought up last week about when we discussed a little bit of island stuff, about staffing stuff. So how many folks do you have, how many employees do you have right now, the Island Authority?
So we have 13. I know last week it was mentioned that we were down to 5. That is, I'm not sure where that number came from. We were 2 years ago at 11. It is increased by 2 because the executive director position was split apart again, as well as a vacancy that we had was filled. So we are now at 13. 2 years ago, we were at 11. We've been at 11 since that 2015 split.
So you've been at 11 up until this last fiscal year?
2 years ago when I started, yes.
Okay. Okay.
Commissioner Berry, final question, and thank you for being
Yes, sir.
here. And obviously, I have to depend on Commissioner Bender to educate me. I mean, since they don't take cash dollars, I don't go on the beach because I don't like the fees to my tag. But in terms of when we took over, when we talk about the boardwalk and those buildings and the lease fees from the boardwalk, I know that now, and let's correct me, that we maintain those. Where do those lease fees go from those buildings in the boardwalk? Who takes those fees? Do we get those as a county, or does that go to the Santa Rosa Island Authority?
It goes to the Santa Rosa Island Authority, the lease fees do. And then we've been working closely with the county to do partnerships and kind of do collaborative funding efforts. So for instance, when we do maintenance projects on the boardwalk, typically SRIA will buy the materials, and then Public Works actually does the labor for us. Then there's been other things that our board has funded. For instance, the new restrooms that will be built on the boardwalk. The SRIA intends to pay for those when those are constructed. There was a new entrance on the boardwalk that was paid for by Portofino Island funds, or not a new entrance, but a revamping of an entrance. So those are some of the projects that we do actually on the boardwalk with SRIA money.
So what percentage of the lease fees that are captured in those buildings in the boardwalk go directly to the boardwalk in that building? I mean,
I don't have that percentage, Commissioner. I can tell you that about 65% of our lease fees as a whole come from the commercial businesses as a whole, so not just the ones on the boardwalk.
so how much do you collect in lease fees just from the boardwalk and the buildings on the boardwalk?
I don't have that number with me, sir, but we can get that for you and provide it to you.
That would be crucial for me.
Okay,
To
absolutely.
be supportive.
Sure.
Robert?
Yeah, just if you, I mean, I was going to say the bathrooms that they're looking at constructing, and a few other things related to the boardwalk. Of course, we've been doing the manpower with the picking up trash and things like that, cleaning of the bathrooms, but I think we've done a good job working together when it comes to the capital projects and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, Robert, that was my question. Of the lease fees that are collected, how much goes to capital, how much goes to personnel, how much goes to general operations? I mean, personnel, and as you said, buying garbage bags to pick up paper. I mean, what is that percentage? Would be a question for me. I mean, because as you know, it was a heavy lift for us to take over Public Works of the beach, and candidly, we want to keep the beach as beautiful as possible, but I can just tell you, walk through my district today, it's paper everywhere. And so, we're paying for that, and no different than your district. I mean, walk down by Johnson Lakes, what is ROI and where those funds are going? And for me, there has to be clarity. And Robert, I'll support you in any way that you go, but that's going to be important, exactly where those lease fees are going and what are we using those dollars to operate.
Sure. I mean, of course, I wasn't here when the board decided to cut the lease fees by 50% or ask that they be cut by 50%.
Steve was here.
And again, it's, I know that we thought there was going to be a different outcome in the court ruling, and that didn't happen, and so it.
Well, there had been multiple
Right.
outcomes in our favor.
Correct,
It wasn't
correct.
just a prospective idea. We had
you're right.
won multiple cases that were subsequently overturned. I mean, there was a real, it wasn't a presumption or a perspective idea.
No, you're right. No, right. And my apologies if I made it seem otherwise. I was just, it didn't work out the way we thought it would, and so I know that the people out there appreciated this board taking action to try to help offset what seemed like the inevitable increase in taxes through the taxation of the land and the improvements to everyone out there. So, and again, the way I remember it was that it equaled about $4 million in cuts, and Public Works and Pensacola Beach Lifeguards equaled about $4 million, and that's how we ended up with them.
Rob, you're absolutely right, and Commissioner Berry is correct, and the intended results probably didn't end the way in which we intended, and obviously Grover led that. But when you absolutely look at the margins of profit in what's been put in, I mean, it's questionable if the return of the dollars makes sense. I mean, and so, I mean, that's true. I mean, you can't, and I agree, you can't divide, all of Pensacola up and give the same service, in Molino that you get at Pensacola Beach. But there is some reciprocity in that, people in Molino are paying the millage rate, and people in Pensacola Beach and the people in Brownsville are, based on value, paying close to the same amount, So I just want to get that cleared up. Robert, we had that conversation at the last meeting, and I've been supportive of you on the beach, but at the same time, I mean, I think there are answers. As Jeff nods his head, there's answers he has to give to Perdido, and there's answers that I need to give to people in Inslee about, how are we spending those dollars. And, one of the things we did was take the burden of Public Works off of those. And, I'm not so sure of, all the capital projects. And it would be good for us, Robert, and I would just say to you, it'd be good for us to know what's the value of those Public Works projects, of those lease fees that we're giving back. So that would be very helpful, of the amount of money that you've done on Public Works projects on.
I'm sorry.
The projects that you're doing, you're saying that you're not taking any lease fees to do operations, correct?
No, all of our operations come from lease fees.
No. The question was, you take dollars from lease fees for the boardwalk and the buildings around there, and you don't use any of that money for operations. We do all of the Public Works. We maintain it, we clean it, we pick up the paper, and we maintain it, correct?
Except on those projects where, like I mentioned, we pay for the materials and then Public Works
That
will
was
do
my
the
point. I
labor. Yes,
asked
sir.
the question, what was the value of those projects?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry, I don't.
No, yeah, I mean, not to operate, but we don't know, as we sit here today, we don't know the value of those projects. We don't know how much you've spent on the capital projects, and I just said that would be very beneficial.
Okay. Overall, the capital projects are in our budget, but in terms of the operational projects, that's in our budget too, but not broken out just by the boardwalk, but we can.
Thanks, Stephan. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Berry?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lee, if you don't mind. So there
I'm
was,
sorry.
yeah, there was some feedback earlier this year at the result of, I believe at the result of your audit about, having, finding some more projects for your revenue.
So we
Correct.
had a funding priorities workshop with our board, and yes, they are looking at what projects can we cost share with the county on. Some of those are boardwalk projects that we did put additional dollars in our budget for, dune walkover projects, that sort of thing.
But that workshop was the result of feedback from your auditor, correct?
I wouldn't say it was necessarily feedback from our auditor, but it
The
was
auditor
looking.
the auditor didn't give you feedback
No.
that you had more revenues than you were spending, and you should probably find some more capital projects to do on the beach as an agency?
Well, I mean, the auditors did show us that we had additional revenues, but it wasn't like a management note that we needed to find
Yeah,
things
I
to do with
didn't
it.
say it was a management
I'm-
note. I just said some feedback.
Yes,
some
sir.
Anecdotal feedback.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So, you know, and Robert, I brought this up last week when I said that I think that there are some revenues out there that I would hope that, you know, through your partnering with Lee and partnering with the Island Authority, that they would be, you know, forthcoming to putting some money into some of these projects that they want to see on the island. And what I see, the biggest increase is a $600,000 increase to the beach renourishment, where they've been putting $1 million in. I hope that the result of that workshop was not just, let's take $600,000 out of this excess revenue that we have and put it towards beach renourishment and eat up the majority of that excess revenue through that one method. I would hope that they're partnering with you in other ways other than just allocating more money to beach renourishment.
Yes, they are, and I indicated a couple projects that we've been working on, and we continue those discussions. I would also say that, Tim, I don't see Tim here, but, you know, there have been some beach renourishment projects that have come in at a higher cost than what they had anticipated, so I think part of that funding increase was in response to those, to make sure that we do have dollars that we can use to fund renourishment when the time comes, because, you know, we could drag it out a little bit, or it could come a lot sooner than we think, depending on how these next few weeks go in the Gulf and even the next few years during this time. So, you know, I think it's, I think what's in there about equates to what was being spent previously on the savings and the repayment of the loan back to the BCC had been previously. So I would say it's more of like a net wash versus where it was 2 years ago. But I agree with you, and I think we have had discussions on that, and so that's why, of course, I've started the discussions with Lee when the governor vetoed the $200,000 to see if we could work with that. And
As, I mean, they are an agency of the county. So if there's anything that I can do to help you from this seat advocate more successfully for partnership from the Island Authority, please let me know, and I will do everything I can to help.
No, I appreciate it, and I've talked to a couple of the Island Authority board members, and they've indicated their support for some of these projects as well, and I think that we have worked really well over Lee's tenure here, and you know, again, like you said, I do, you know, ask where the Island Authority can assist when I feel it's appropriate, and but I understand what you're saying. Thank you.
Any more discussion? Well, yeah, I appreciate it, and hopefully we can get those answers by the next budget hearing for me. and
Yes, sir.
It'll give me clarification.
Okay.
To help me.
Mr. Chairman, I was going to say, if we need anything else on Island Authority, I'd go ahead and ask those of Lee. If not, let her go ahead and go.
I don't know why she's still here. I'm ready to go
Okay.
myself. I mean,
right.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Sounds
I
good.
mean,
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm good. I mean, I'll ask you. I mean, you know, I mean, I had the same conversation at the last meeting. You know, I mean, I want to get paper picked up in Brownsville. I mean, I like the white sand, but you know, it is a barrier island, Steve. You don't have any barrier islands in there. I mean, kind of. You Bible readers would realize barrier islands are all have to be renourished. Brett Barnes.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and the board. I'm here to talk about consideration of the budget for tax reasons, of course. Been a resident of Escambia County for 49 years and a property-owning taxpayer for 29. I'm having a hard time understanding with probably near-record assessments and projected revenues why we're not seriously putting more effort into looking at adopting a rollback rate in relation to how the budget is approved. It seems like, well, we've had a lot of people asking for money out of the pot, and I'm not going to minimize their agenda or their notions, but I'm going to ask you to take less from me, and probably many other people that aren't here tonight. I won't claim to be anybody's representative but myself. I own a few investment properties, and over the years, I've absorbed lots of tax increases, insurance, liability, personal liability. We just can't, it's just not foreseeable to me, increasing tax rates when we have the opportunity to do rollback. What we have is people that will probably throw up their hands after a while and say, this is too much. Longtime investors in the community, as myself, who have a reasonable and sober return on investment, may end up selling out to outside investors who would like to accelerate their return, probably not in the interest of affordable housing. So I'm here in short to, with the short time I have, to enter or hopefully re-enter your consciences along with the county administrator and find a way to get back to rollback. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, before the speaker leaves.
Yes, sir, Commissioner Magash, please.
Did you sent an email to the board as well? Are you Mr. Flores?
No, Barnes.
Barnes, okay, my apologies.
I did not.
I had a very similar email come, and I just want to make sure that, from my perspective, because I think you're bringing valid points, but I would simply say that this board has not raised the millage rate. The rates remain static. And for my own part, being a long-term elected official on the school board here and then over here on the county, I've never once voted to raise that millage rate. Now,
Okay.
we've had some ups and downs, and I will tell you, in 07, 08, the millage rate, I was on the school board at that time.
It was rough.
It was very tough, and you know, the pressure at that point was, we got to raise the millage rate so we get the same amount that we had last year or more, and I voted against that. And so I just want, I mean, I'm not going to speak for any man up here, but I'll tell you from my perspective, 17 years, I've never once voted to raise year-over-year millage tax rates. I'm not raising anyone's taxes. What we do up here, we apply a static rate, and we grow this economy. And the economy is doing well. And people, you know, folks will come up and say, we'll hit the rollback. We can't hit the rollback if we're doing 4-year deals for our sheriff and giving record raises to our first responders. I mean, that's a very expensive service that we provide. Cost of labor, the cost, as you know, with inflation and everything else, the cost of labor in a governmental entity has gone through the roof. So, I mean, I know it's difficult, but I just want to make sure that everyone understands we're not raising anyone's taxes. Our rates are static. We're keeping our rates static, and you know, the value of the tax roll goes up, and that's a good thing. But you know, people have told me we want first responders. We want them to be paid well. So we've raised firefighter pay. We just recently did a deal with their lieutenants. We want our sheriff's deputies paid well. Now they're among the highest paid agencies in the area. We want our corrections officers paid well. We've done a deal with them. We're making sure that our first responders are the highest paid in the area, and that's an investment that we make as property owners. I own several properties myself. I can commiserate with what you're saying, but you can't get blood out of a stone. And if we go to the rollback rate, we can't do 4-year salary deals for the sheriff. We can't do record raises for our fire service. We can't do raises for our transportation, our ECAT. It just simply can't be done. Folks never want to cut in services. I've never had one person come up to that podium and say, we want you to cut services. Haven't had that happen. Everyone wants more services, but that costs money. But I appreciate you coming, and I agree with you. But I want you to know this board hasn't raised that millage rate. And
I understand, Commissioner, the
Thank you, sir.
millage rate, but the bottom line is it's more money out of the individual's pocket, and that individual, for the most part, doesn't have either the lawful ability or sometimes the actual ability to go out and grab more. So that's why I implore the board and the administrator to look for things that could be made more efficient, or have the courage to say no to some people.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
I mean, sir, for Republicans, man, let's roll back the millage again, man. I mean, you know, let's not give any service. Jeff, I mean, here's the reality of it is, since Stephen and I have been on this board, and you as well, and with our other new colleagues, we've never increased the millage. The millage has been rolled back 2 times in recent history, one with Mike Whitehead, one with Grover, that the millage rate has been rolled back. The good thing about our economy is that houses are appreciating, and so obviously it is more money. And so I sympathize with you. You're absolutely right that there's more money in real dollars being paid out of our citizens' hand. And so for me, that's why it's important that we are, Jeff, good stewards of the money that we allocate, even to our outside agencies, to our departments, because he's absolutely right. When we talked about people with jobs, as we said earlier, someone who owns a home that's making $15 an hour, and their house appreciates for $50,000 more than it did, and they have another $500 of taxes. That's real money. And so, I mean, we got to be very considerate of that to our citizens. And so, sir, Mr. Barnes, I appreciate you saying that because you are right on point. I mean, unfortunately, we have gentrification within, many of our Alphabet Street, and it's not because people couldn't pay their mortgage, because they couldn't pay their taxes. Because they're on a fixed income and they're making $12 an hour, and they had to decide whether they're going to get something to eat or whether they're going to pay their taxes and pay their utility bills. So your compassion is good. So I appreciate that. We have no other public speakers. Are there any other speakers that would like to speak? Before you cut, you're welcome to do it. Do we have anything else from the dais? I do want to acknowledge a couple things. Obviously, our requested amount for 2024 is 870 versus the proposed 880, which is, a different number, and that's because some things were added, Wes, before this was posted. And so this is in no way the final allocation. One of the things, Wes, that, for me is we're looking at outside agency funding, but as we move to our general budget, we'll talk about that later. But at this time, the chair will entertain a motion to adopt the tentative millage resolution as presented in the agenda backup at 6.615 mills for a countywide millage rate, 0.35.
I'm sorry, just to be sure, it's 6165.
All right, thank you, Alice. I'm glad you were listening. 6.6165 mills for the countywide millage rate, 0.359 for library MSTU, and 0.685 mills for the sheriff's law enforcement MSTU for fiscal year 2023-24.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
Mr. Chairman, that was 5 yes votes on that.
No worries. Thank you so much.
She didn't buy the software.
No, no, you didn't procure that. So, don't worry. Maybe we got to outside agency fund you. Chair will entertain a motion to adopt the tentative budget resolution of $701,963,319 for the fiscal year 2023-24 as presented in the agenda backup.
Second. I'm sorry, I moved that. I apologize.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Please raise your hand. Are we good? That passes 5 in favor, none opposed. Thank you so much. The second public hearing for the adoption of the fiscal year 2023-24 budget will be held September 25th, 2023 at 5:01 p.m. in the board chambers on the first floor of the Ernie Lee McGahey Government Building located at 221 Palafox Street.
So moved.
We have a motion and second. Please vote by raising your hand. That passes unanimous. Thank you. The public hearing for consideration of adopting the fiscal year 2023 non-ad valorem special assessment roll will be at 5:02. Do we need to vote on that, Madam Chairman?
Yes, your administrator is going to present it, and then you do need to have a motion and vote.
Thank you, Director Marino.
Commissioners, there's a list of all the non-ad valorem districts and rates provided in your agenda backup.
Any speakers, Mr. Chairman?
No, sir, we do not.
I would move the roll in the affirmative.
We have a
Second.
motion and a second. Please vote. Madam Clerk, that passes unanimous. Thank you so much. Are there any other speakers for public forum? Thank you. See, board adoption of the fiscal year 2023 non-ad valorem special assessment roll? Oh, good. Okay, got it. The chair will entertain a motion to adopt the 2023-24 non-enrollment special assessment as presented in the agenda backup. We're good with that? With that, are there any other questions from the board? Thank you all for being here. We appreciate your support. We stand adjourned.